everyone. Welcome back to another Canada Immigration Live Q&A. I'm here with Alicia Backman-Bahari, my fearless co-pilot. How are you doing, Alicia?
I'm doing well, Mark. It was funny because I went away to Montreal last week for a national immigration law conference, and when I left, it was cold, it was rainy, it was a few degrees above zero, and then I guess it was beautiful here. It was like
Yeah, it
25
was.
degrees while I was gone. But of course, the smoke, right? The smoke rolled
Yeah.
in, and
Yep.
now we've got wildfires going crazy in northern Alberta and BC, and people are evacuating. Um, so it's so extreme a temperature difference, right? We go basically from winter to wildfire. And so, you know, spring is in the air, things are starting to bloom, but I really do feel for our neighbors and friends who live in northern Alberta. So Fort McMurray is getting evacuated right now. Areas in northern BC are also getting evacuated right now. So it's tough times in the West right now.
It is. It really is. And, you know, this is a pattern that we're seeing over and over again. I think it's, I can't remember the last summer where we didn't have, you know, where we didn't have smoke floating through the air. And so hopefully we can devise, make some decisions and that can try to help that and facilitate it. And my heart goes out to all those who fight the fires. And also I hope that, people are just wise as they're camping in the backcountry too, that none of this is contributed because of just human stupidity. So keep our fingers crossed that this season we'll have lots of rain and it will keep things under check. But yeah, it's nice regardless to have the snow gone and the warmth here, and that's the beauty of Canada. We've got the full 4 seasons. So now, Alicia, you have gone to you hinted that you went to the CBA National Immigration Conference, and just so you guys know, Alicia organized the whole conference with another I think it was Kieran's. Was it Kieran who did it with you last year? And this year, Alicia helped to gather and herd up all of the speakers. Coordinating with Department of Justice to get speakers from government and helping to just select awesome speakers for the conference this year. So she's a big player, Alicia is. So don't be deceived. So, um, so from that conference, I'm going to get you, for the viewers today, as kind of our intro, to just maybe share a couple big takeaways, things that you learned, because the immigration officers were there, the heads of departments, across the board. Were there some prevailing or pervasive things that you saw that really would be useful for our listeners to take away from what you learned there?
And just to clarify, I wasn't in like selecting the speakers. The agenda committee selects the speakers. I was just on the speakers committee. I'm inviting and coordinating and trying to
Herding,
make all
like
the
I said,
speakers
she was
ready,
herding people. Yes.
materials and all these things. So we had a fantastic conference this year in Montreal. Minister Miller did come out to the gala and he had some remarks for us. It was very good to be able to have everybody in immigration was attending, which was fabulous. And I think it was a very good opportunity for dialogue. Um, it's great when the people who are sent by government, and it's not just, it's social, like it's ESDC. So we're looking at IRCC, we're looking at CBSA, we're looking at DOJ, we've got the federal courts, we've got the Immigration and Refugee Board, we had the chairperson there. The former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour was there for our opening discussion. And so I think we were really looking at overall, where is Canada situated in the world with respect to immigration policy? And looking a little bit outside of our kind of insular zones to what's going on in the world and how is that affecting immigration policy and where do we want to be as a country in terms of our immigration policy. So that was very good to ground us as our opening discussion, our fireside chat with the former Supreme Court Justice, who can really give us very interesting insight, having worked internationally for so many years and is not kind of filtered through various political lenses anymore, for some really kind of honest discussion. And then we really got into, we had some ADM who attended on behalf of IRCC, and that was very interesting to see what's happening with advanced analytics, what's happening with AI in terms of immigration processing. Immigration is working really hard to develop whole new platforms to interface with people in a more effective way. Um, that's something that came to the fore. We are looking at, of course, our overall allocations, this whole cap on temporary foreign workers and how that's going to affect the system. Everything that's going on with study permits and temporary residence is directly tied to economic outcomes. And of course, express entry. And so, in addition to being the chair of the Speakers Committee as a volunteer, I was also a moderator for the express entry panel. And we had a fantastic IRCC express entry director who was talking to us about the fact that I think a lot of people don't know express entry draws are planned, right? They're timed out and planned for the whole year based on their targeted allocations. And he did confirm the numbers that we had, Mark, that were released in the ATIP. Those are all correct for
Yep.
2024. So we kind of know what the targets are for express entry. Interesting things also came out with the PNPs, and Mark and I just recorded a whole podcast on what's going on with the provincial nomination, provincial categories right now, because there are so many, I think, areas for potential misinformation out there when people start to become desperate. So PNPs are not going to be the solution for many people. It is getting extremely competitive, and people need to become very strategic and really understand each of those programs and know that most of the time you have to have ties to that province and an employer in the province before you have a chance. So those are some of the key things that are going on right now in the immigration world. There are legislative changes too. I don't think we've actually talked about that yet, Mark. So there's draft. Whenever there are potential changes to the immigration refugee protection regulations, the government has to publish that. And so those were published, and there are a lot of changes coming specifically with respect to refugee and how determinations are being made, and how people can basically be more easily removed once there is a negative determination on a refugee or a person in need of protection claim.
This is a good yeah, this is a really really good intro, Alicia. I'm following here. These lives are always a little bit rough and tumble. There's one person saying that there are sound issues or there's echoing or something. Could you guys just some other people chime in and just let me know if there's some problems with the audio, because I can't see it or hear it on my end. I have echo cancellation set up, so I'm not sure if the problem is just associated with just the one viewer or if others are experiencing problems with the sound as well. I know sometimes that my audio is a little bit more quiet than Alicia's. I have this squeaky, creaky mic here that I can get up and increase my audio just a little bit. But yeah, I'm just wondering if others were having any sound issues. Okay, so it looks like it's just the one person. Oh, we got the, okay, excellent, excellent. All right, good. We're back on track. Okay, so all right, so let's do a few shout outs here to some people as we transition our way into our live Q&A. I want to just share a little bit of insight with individuals. Oh, wow, my computer's even slow. Maybe that's why it's echo cancellation here. Just give me 1 second here. The tech is working in the background, you guys. There we go. Okay, let's pull up and do a few shout outs to people that are connected in. And so if you're first tuned in here, do like Vina and let us know where you are listening from. And also, it's kind of fun to learn what stage of the immigration process you're at. So those comments are really, really helpful. We like that. Yari here says, Mark is the best immigration consultant in YouTube. Well, I definitely appreciate that shout out. I'm not an immigration consultant. I think the consultants would take offense to that. I'm an immigration lawyer, but hopefully I'm able to offer some assistance. And part of the reason I was telling you about the CBA and Alicia's involvement is because she's the real rock star of this operation. I'm just the tech guy. All right. We've got Fenley says, good morning, Mr. Mark. Okay, great. We've got Strawberry Lacroix, maybe. Nice. That's a pretty, is that your real name? That's amazing if it is. I'd love to have Strawberry as my name. Okay, let's see who else we have tuning in here. I know I asked a bunch of people, Yeah, Saba was saying that the sound is echoing. I think it's on your end, Saba, for whatever reason. Okay, let's see here. And then we'll get to your questions, Vina. She said, did they say something regarding the plan for French francophones at the conference? Well, Alicia, I think it's business as usual. Like they're aggressively doing this, right?
And they are aggressively doing it because of the agreements that the provincial government, the Quebec government, has with the federal government. And so it is part of their overall legislated agreements, bilateral agreements. And so that's why they are pursuing it. And the 30% target for express entry draws is going to be francophone. And keep in mind that that is not just a targeted
The
draw. It
category.
means
Yeah,
that whenever they do a general draw, a lot of those people that have super high CRS scores are already going to be pulled in simply because they have the high French. And so it doesn't mean that targeted francophone draws are going to be 30%. It means overall, when immigration looks at the numbers for express entry, they want to have 30% who are hitting that NCLC level 7 across the board.
indeed. Now, Maria here, she says, Mark, maybe you can add in your express entry class that the FBI report is not in color. I think a lot of people are freaking out about this. Well, the reality is in the course, if you look, Maria, the samples that we have are all black and white. And they've been black and white since the beginning of time, really, since they started doing electronic FBI reports that IRCC accepts. They've always been black and white. So there's no need to freak out in any way, shape, or form. All right. Looks like we've got our first little super that popped in here. Let's see. Okay. Oh, yes. This is Anatoly. He says, hey, Alicia and Mark, great news. I'm now tuning in from Toronto, not the UK. After getting my ITA last May, Alicia helped me prep and submit my EAPR. And I think the most appropriate thing for us to do for Anatoly here, I know I've got some confetti, but it takes some time for that to appear. So we're going to do some applause. Oh, everything is really slowed up here. See, this is what happens when you do videos for this long. Eventually your computer says, hey, I'm like the IRCC portal. I am so full of data that, and my hard drive is so full, you need to clean things out. And so, Anatoly, we do have some confetti here for you. Congratulations. And it's now loaded up. And we absolutely, Alicia and I love to hear the positive stories. One of the challenges we have is when we're we're helping people with their applications, we don't take over your application. You control it. You still get the full force of us and our immigration knowledge and experience and assistance all the way through to submission. But often people, we don't always hear from them when they come to Canada, not like we did in the old days when we were big brother or big sister and took over the application and just told you when it was approved. Now, sometimes we don't even know, when it gets approved. And I say when, because they do. Now, congratulations, Anatoly. It's so awesome. And now I won't hold it against you that you're in Toronto instead of Calgary, but it's still awesome that you're here. And I, Alicia, I also got just an awesome email from one of our Iranian clients that went through express entry, and it was really tricky for him. And he got his application approved very quickly. And it's just, it makes it all worthwhile, right? All worthwhile.
Yeah. And Mark, speaking of
Mm-hmm.
express entry, because this is
Yes.
something that is catching people unawares, and I know that I have some clients who are sitting in the express entry pool and they are waiting and they are hoping for a nomination. Well, keep in mind that, and I just stuck the link there for you, Mark, but express entry has sent a notification, IRCC has sent a notification to people saying, hey, we've increased our settlement funds requirements for proof of
Yep.
funds. And so you have to actively go into your account and update that figure. And so a few of my clients have been saying, well, do I need to provide bank statements? What do I do? And this is coming into effect very soon. You have approximately 10 days, a little bit, around there. By May 28th, you must have gone in and updated your profile because the settlement amount for federal skilled worker category has increased. So no longer are you at that 13,390, you're now at a minimum of 14,690 is going to be what you have to prove, and say in your profile, yes, I have at least that amount in accessible funds as a single applicant to be eligible under FSW. So be careful about this. What you need to do is you need to log back into your GC Key account, go to your Express Entry profile, view and edit your Express Entry profile, go to the field that talks about how much settlement funds you have, and put in legitimately what you have as accessible funds. But know that if your accessible funds are under the new requirements, you're going to fall out of eligibility for federal skilled worker. Now, you might still be okay if you're qualifying for the Canadian experience class, because that one does not mandatorily require settlement funds. But if you're hanging your hat, if you're relying on federal skilled worker to be able to meet minimum eligibility, then this can be a big deal. And then the
Oh,
next thing is make sure that you actually transmit it, submit it, and have it fully submitted in, as an update in your application.
that's a great point. And that's something I want to talk about as well, is the fact that I had a client once who didn't include a copy of her IELTS report, which is totally acceptable because IRCC doesn't ask for it. But she received a request, and likely it's attributed to the test center, maybe where she had the test, or maybe there was fraud, or maybe they couldn't find the actual report, or for whatever reason it wasn't transmitted to IRCC like it should have been. But anyways, they requested a copy of it. So she went into her EAPR portal, and she followed the links. She went to her document checklist. There was a new spot in that document checklist for her to upload her IELTS report, and she dutifully did it. She uploaded it. It was there. Great. Then 7 days later, yes, IRCC were jerks about this. 7 days later, they refused her application for not providing it. And what did she fail to do? What did she fail to do, Alicia?
She forgot to go in and say transmit, and then you've got to attest and sign, and then you've got to
Yep.
say transmit again, and then it'll say congratulations, you've updated your profile.
Yep. That, and then when you go back into your document checklist, you can see that it's not just uploaded, but that it's submitted. And that's what she failed to do. So please, like Alicia said, understand, because sometimes if it's your profile and you have got something that's not completed in there, it might be a reason, it might be a reason why, even though you have the points, you don't get an invitation to apply. So there might, your profile may be disrupted. And so I don't know the full impact of this, Alicia, but regardless, who cares? The key for all of you is to make sure that you are updating it properly and submitting and making sure that that new update is properly transmitted to IRCC. Okay, we have another question here. I'm going to pull up from Promise. And Alicia, you can address this one. This is a super chat. She says, for someone that has been falsely arrested once in the past, more like a mass arrest, and the innocent were released, does the person need to declare it in a visiting visa application? So this is a arrest, a charge. This is a visitor visa application.
Mm-hmm. So Promise, it's so important for people to carefully read that statutory declaration question. And it says, have you ever been charged, arrested, detained, or convicted of an offense in Canada? And here is the important part, or any other country. And so if somebody has been charged, yes, for sure, you've got to talk about it. If they've been arrested but not charged, yes, you've got to talk about it. If they've been detained but not arrested or charged, you still need to talk about it. So yes, read very carefully that question. And it also doesn't say Canada, it's any country. And it also doesn't say only within the last 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, it anytime ever in the past, even if you were a minor. And so make sure that people are reading that question very carefully and disclosing.
I am just working through, and my computer is saying, Mark, don't try to open up the form. It is using up too much bandwidth. So bear with me, everyone. I'm going to close a bunch of applications on my computer here so that we don't lose it here in the midst of our, and that's why Alicia was kind of cutting out there a little bit. I was trying to upload the actual visitor visa form. So we'll hold off on that. But yes, if when in doubt, disclose. And I'll give a little bit of a feedback on this, Alicia, too. I had a client recently who was a little bit frustrated with me because we had disclosed a flagpole that was done as potentially being a refused entry to the US. And she was a little upset because it potentially could now delay the processing of her application. And the answer is very simple. If you are disclosing something that you need to, you are 100% avoiding any chance of a misrepresentation finding. And if that disclosure triages your application to a different officer just to double check and look at it and say, oh yeah, no, that's not a refused entry. Well, you're going to do that 100% of the time, because I don't want to have even a 5% risk that an officer could say, well, you misrepresented because the US system says you've got a refused entry and you never disclosed it, versus maybe adding 2 more months of processing on for an officer to confirm, yeah, it probably wasn't a refusal, and it's not an issue. So I do not take chances with that, you guys. I don't. And if it means that something is going to be triaged to a different review because you've indicated that maybe, yes, you had a prior refusal, well, I will do that 100% of the time versus exposing or potentially exposing a client to a misrep finding. So sometimes people think, hey, it'll be faster if I don't do this. Don't ever go down that path. Ever.
And and Mark, that brings up a good point. So one of the really interesting sessions that I went to at the conference was on the port of entry applications, so advanced port of entry applications and flagpoling. And we had a senior CBSA officer there who said, look, one of the downfalls of port of entry flagpole applications is not only on the Canadian side, they really dislike it, but more and more on the US side. So what is happening is a lot of people are leaving Canada, they're entering into the US immigration area, and it's taking those US officers 45 minutes to an hour to process them properly in order to turn them around and send them back to Canada. And that is causing a huge amount of issues for US immigration authorities. And there is now more and more pushback and more dialogue, also because it's causing backlogs in the US system. And there's political pressure because of there is a perception that migrants are trying to come through Canada into the US. And so they talked about closing loopholes to try to stop the ability to flagpole. So be very, very careful if you are thinking of potentially trying to flagpole. Make sure that you have valid US visa authorization in order to enter the US, because even if they, even if you do leave Canada and they start processing you in the US, there's no guarantee you get to come back to Canada if you don't have a valid US visitor visa. So this is something that is increasingly on the radar for immigration authorities on both sides. And just so you know, the Border Security Officer, so CBSA officer in Canada, has access to your any US criminal information if it exists.
All right. We have another super here. This one's from Divya. She says, can remote work for a Canadian employer done outside Canada from their Indian office, can it be counted as foreign work experience while being paid in Canadian dollars into a Canadian bank account, paying a Canadian tax? Oh, what is that? That's a good teaching opportunity for all of you. Divya, there is no way Alicia and I can offer you any specific advice on this issue without you booking a consult. There's a lot of things that would suggest to me that you're going to have some problems. The short answer is, yeah, I don't know, Alicia, if you want to address this in any way, because, okay, let's put it this way. I'll always try to give some value here. So if your company, if you are outside Canada completely and you are working remotely for a Canadian company, generally speaking, if you've never come to Canada, generally speaking, it's considered to be foreign work experience. If you are in Canada and you are working remotely for a company that is outside of Canada, that has no presence in Canada, that is considered to be foreign work experience. If you're a Canadian company and you are inside Canada, if the company's Canadian and you're inside Canada and you're working for them, then that's generally considered to be Canadian work experience. But your situation meshes a whole bunch of things together. Yeah, I'm not going to say yes at all. Alicia, what are your thoughts? Is there anything that you can add to Divya other than ringing the triangle and telling her to slide over and book a consult through the link below in the description?
And so, Divya, one thing I can say as a piece of legal information is that Canadian companies must be able to prove that anybody that they have hired has legal authorization to work. And so if you are entering the Canadian labor market and you're hired by a Canadian company and paid by a Canadian company and they're doing payroll remittances, that often is viewed as working for a Canadian company. And if you're working for a Canadian company, you have to have legal authorization to work in Canada. And so that's where your company will need to be very careful to make sure that they are employing you with proper authorization if you're entering the Canadian labor market.
All right, let's tackle this one from VK. VK says, inland federal skilled worker, never visited India. This is a police clearance certificate one. Never visited India after October 22nd, 2023. PCC issuance, okay? Submitted the PCC in EAPR on January 22nd, 2024. Can IRCC request a new PCC as my PR application review is delayed for another 5 months due to medical? So maybe just touch briefly, Alicia, on the concept of police clearance certificates generally. We cover this all in the Express Entry Accelerator course in detail. And obviously, when clients retain us, we make sure that this is all done properly. But Alicia, maybe you can just address just the police clearance certificates just generally and then tackle this specific question.
So in general, IRCC can always ask for an updated police certificate. So if they do ask for an updated police certificate, they will normally send you an email saying, go log into your account. You've got a message, and that message says, give us a new police certificate. You usually have to do so within a fairly short period of time, maybe about 30 days. So they can always ask. The other thing to keep in mind is that you need to meet the completeness check requirements. So go on to the IRCC website, look specifically for what is required for a police certificate for express entry applications, and depending on your country of nationality and your country of residence, that's going to determine from which countries you need police certificates. So if you were residing anywhere for 6 months continuously, so you look and you can aggregate them, then you have to make sure to get a police certificate from that country. If you're no longer living in that country and you had a police certificate issued after you left that country and you've not gone back, then usually IRCC policy said that is okay to submit, but they can ask you for an update.
All right, let's address a second little touch on, and I'm still going to ring this bell for you, Divya, but because it's a super chat, I'll bring your question up. She says, update, I'm working for the same Canadian employer since last 3 years on a postgrad, April 2022, 21 to 22nd, November 22nd. We're done from inside Canada. Post that, have been working remotely from India since December 2022 till date. So Divya, it may be possible to claim this as foreign work experience. It's not going to be eligible for Canadian work experience, but we can't confirm because we need to get more details from you. So we're just not able to specifically address this. So hope you can understand. And for those of you who are wondering, well, what is Mark talking about? If this is your first time here, Alicia and I are Canadian immigration lawyers, which our title says here in the video. And our firm, Holthe Immigration Law, has a very easy mechanism for you to click on, speak to a lawyer. And then from here, you can go through and you can book a consultation with myself, Alicia, Igor, and yeah, everything that you need is all here. If you want to check out, see what other people are saying about us, you can easily check out the latest reviews. And so, oh, look at this, an AI generated summary. Isn't that nice? Well, look at this summary, Alicia. It offers Exceptional service with knowledgeable and professional lawyers, provide thorough consultations, and have extensive knowledge and experience with the Canadian immigration process. They're reliable, responsive, and provide quality service that exceeds expectations. I would add one little thing in here, actually maybe two. We truly care about you guys, and we are kind most of the time. Alicia's kind all the time. Sometimes if someone doesn't want to follow my advice and I know they're going to take their vehicle and basically run it into a brick wall because they're not listening to me, then I get a little impatient with them. That's hard, watching people sabotaging themselves. But at the end of the day, especially people that choose to go ahead and pay people money for job offers, things like that, or choose not to follow my instructions and want to continue with a misrepresentation on their applications, yeah, those things, realistically, that's probably why we have our whopping 4.9 rating here instead of a 5, because at times people don't want to hear the advice that I'm giving them, which is totally fine. All right. Okay, let's see what we've got here. This one's from IFTech. He's been a follower for a long time. He says, everything is completed on the tracker May 10th. Only one ADR of medical was asked last month, which submitted. When can we expect the final decision? IFTech, you can see that things move quickly. Okay. So as of 5 days ago, he indicates that everything has been completed. The medical's done. Realistically, you can look at the processing times generally, and they're going to be pretty close. So what do we have right now for processing times? I think it's about 5 months or so. Generally speaking, if we just slide over here, and you guys can all look this up yourself, when you check processing times, and then we go to economic immigration, and I'm assuming IFTech, you're probably a CEC, and when you click processing times, yeah, it's about 5 months, just updated about a week ago, or actually 2 weeks ago. So there you go. We don't have as many of those processing times questions like we used to, Alicia, especially through the pandemic when everybody was just stuck in this horrible limbo period. There really, that was probably 1 in every 3 questions were, what is the processing time? Okay. Here's a good question. Maria says, where should we upload the PNP certificate if the document checklist didn't generate a separate field? I did change it in the APR that I have a PNP. So Alicia, does IRCC ask for a PNP certificate, and what do you do in those circumstances?
So, normally I always like to include that PNP certificate because it shows clearly that you have nomination, that nomination is still valid, and that was the basis on which you got your 600 points. And probably the easiest way to include it is to bundle it in part of your client letter of explanation documentation. So you have that field at the end. This is something that IRCC is aware of, that sometimes you get what Mark calls the SMART checklist, and sometimes you get the not so smart checklist, that client information field keeps disappearing. But when you have it, make sure to put a placeholder there, and then that is where you could upload extra supporting documents that you need, specifically like your PNP nomination certificate.
All right, let's jump to our next question. This one is from Marlena, and she says, is it advisable to begin applying for other jobs now, considering I need the 50 extra points for express entry from my current job? My PR application is in progress, and I plan to leave my current job ASAP. So once again, whenever someone asks the question, should I do something? That is specific legal advice, Marlena, and we really are not able to give you, I would be loath to give you specific advice without knowing a whole lot more about your situation. One thing I can say generally, because of the situation that we're in right now with the CRS scores being so astronomically high with express entry, it's critical that you guys really take a very, very serious look at your current employment. If your employer, if you see that your work permit is going to be expiring, in a relatively short period of time, heck, even this year, but your CRS scores are not going to be high or high enough, at least based on the current rounds of invitations, then I would have a very direct conversation with your employer to see if they're willing to support you with an LMIA. If they're not willing to do that or unable to do that, then in those circumstances, the only options you have are to work out the rest of your work permit and return home, or consider changing jobs to an employer that can and is willing to file a labor market impact assessment application on your behalf and support you to get those extra 50 points. So that would be the advice that I would give anyone generally, Marlena. But once again, I recommend you guys seriously consider booking a consult so we can chat about this. Okay, this one is Batman. And he says, hey, Mark and Alicia, my wife graduated from a DLI last month and planning to apply for outside Canada postgrad work permit. Okay. Can she apply for a postgrad before his current study permit expires, or can she apply postgrad within 6 months? Alicia, maybe you can address this. I don't know why they're applying outside of Canada for the postgrad. We don't know that, Batman, but just generally maybe just hit on the high level for postgrad work permits.
Mm-hmm. So postgrads are very time specific. They will expire. Your ability to successfully apply for one expires 180 days after completion of your program. IRCC views the completion of your program as the earliest date on which you get your transcript or a letter of completion from your designated learning institution, or when you actually have your diploma or degree issued. So on the earliest of those 3 dates, that starts the clock running, and you only have a 180-day window within which to submit that valid complete PGWP application, and your study permit must also still be valid. So those are the preconditions for submitting that postgrad work permit, and it can get somewhat complex if you also have a spouse trying to apply for the open spousal work permit, because the usual rule is that the principal applicant, the person who's eligible for the PGWP, has to make sure that they can prove that they will be working in the usually high-skilled job. So follow the rules that talk about when you can apply for an open spousal work permit and what is required as supporting evidence for proof that the principal applicant is working in Canada.
All right, next question's from Jay. Can work from home as an internet and phone sales agent experience, can it be counted inside Canada for any pathway to PR? I'm on an open work permit connected to my spouse, closed business, blah, blah, blah. So this one, Jay, comes down to, is this a tier 3 or higher position? And if we just slide over here, I'll show you, this is how we look at this stuff. So obviously in the course, we cover all of that in our Express Entry Accelerator. But the place I go to is the NOC 2021. And the first thing we want to look at is, generally speaking, is a sales agent, and it comes down to your duties. But you've indicated here, if we go back here, that you're a phone sales agent. And there's a difference between technical sales specialist and someone who's just selling to consumers. And generally, retail, trade, services representative, whatever fashion, generally that's not the type of position that would be considered a tier 3. But we always go to the NOC 2021 and then we pull it up, we search for it. And if we go with the job title, let's see here, phone, let's see what comes up if I just type in phone. Sometimes this is how I do it. So carriers, supervisors, insurance, receptionists, survey interviewers, dispatchers, retail sales supervisors, retail salespersons, and visual merchandisers. So sometimes I will look here, and I don't know if this is it, but I'm just pulling it up just so that you guys can see. And then what I do is I look at the duties that I'm actually performing to see if they match with all of the activities in the lead statement. Sometimes I will look at the titles as just a little bit of an indication. It's hard because any type of a retail salesperson, when you are in person, is going to fit into here. You can see computer salesperson, retail. So maybe that's, you're going into a store. All this could be that. Greet customers, advise customers. But in your situation, this is essentially how it goes. So I don't have the ability to, to look up your NOC right here on the spot. But that's how you determine whether or not your position can be considered skilled, a tier 3 or higher, or low skill, which is in many programs is ineligible. Now, with some PNPs, they do have the ability to go through, like Alberta's opportunity stream. It's not as focused on specific occupations. They have a negative list. If you're on the list, you can't apply, but generally it was pretty open. Now that program's closed. And some other provinces have some programs like that, but it really comes down to how you classify it.
And Mark, I think maybe we can rewind a little bit and
Mhm.
just tell people the easy rule of thumb is the second digit. Okay, so we are dealing with a 5-digit knock code. And maybe you can pull up the matrix, Mark,
Sure.
the knock matrix, because people sometimes a visual is helpful. Um, it is, you may see a 4-digit knock code, and that is the old system, but now we are on a 5-digit knock code. So 2021 version is the one that we want to be looking at. It should have 5 digits in all the knocks. In order to determine whether you have a high skilled or a low skilled job, basically low skilled, you have very little chance and no
Wow.
chance under express entry. But in order to determine your tier level, whether it's high or low skilled, if the second digit is a 4 or a 5, you're done, right? So when Mark was pulling up all those ones that said 6-4, those are all low skilled jobs. It is not going to qualify or make you eligible for express entry under either federal skilled worker or CEC. So be very careful. If when you sit down and you look through your national occupation classification job duties and the lead statement, that opening paragraph, if you say, yeah, really what I'm doing is a 6-4 job, right? And you can have other digits after that. There'll be 3 more digits after that. But if your second digit is a 4, it's low skilled and you're not going to qualify for express entry either under federal skilled worker or under CEC. So that's an easy rule of thumb. Second digit cannot be a 4 or a 5. And you have to do a legitimate assessment. You've got to do some soul searching and say, yeah, really what I'm doing is not a supervisory level. It's probably going to be low skilled.
Okay, here's a good question. This one is from Sweet Mills, and it switches it up a little bit to sponsorship. So, in practice, do the sponsor and sponsored person basically file a separate affidavit or stat dec stating their relationship in an inland sponsorship program? Also, is inland application better outside? What's your thoughts on this, Alicia?
Yeah, so maybe Mark, I wrote a whole article on in Canada versus outside Canada for spousal sponsorships, and whether one is better or not really depends on your circumstances and what you want to achieve in this application. And sometimes you can't file an outside Canada or you can't file an inside Canada depending on your circumstances. So take a look at this article in terms of which one is better or what are the differences between the different programs. The next thing is, yes, you have to provide proof of your marriage relationship. And so if it is a legal marriage, then you've got your marriage certificate. If it is a common law relationship, then you have a little bit of extra homework to do to try to demonstrate that you are meeting the legal definition of common law partners, which is 12 months continuous cohabitation in a conjugal relationship. And in order to prove that, most people are going to do a statutory declaration of common law union. So there's the IMM 5409 form. And most of the time, if you're in person and you're living in the same place, then you will both sign that and you'll take it to a notary public and have that notarized with your signatures, and you will attach your proof. And usually proof is going to be cohabitation. So a lease with both of your names on it for over a year, for example, is one of the categories on that document that they list. There's other alternate proof, but you'll want to make sure that that document is properly signed. Be careful if you're trying to separately sign your statutory declaration of common law union. Different jurisdictions, different provinces have requirements on what's called remote commissioning or having people do a notarization when they're not physically present in the same area as you.
Let's jump to our next question here. This one's from Nishant. He says, hey, Mark and Alicia, I hope you're well. Can I meet Canadian PR obligations while I am in India if I'm running an e-commerce website in Canada? So this is maintaining PR is what he's focused on here.
Mm-hmm. So permanent residency requirements and obligations are under Section 28 of the Act, and they say that every 5-year period. So from the date of your landing, when you actually were issued your COPR, that's the start date. And you're going to look forward or backward at the 5 years. And you're going to say, within that period of time, can I prove that I was physically present in Canada for 730 days within that 5-year period? Foreign presence does not count. Physically present, your feet need to be on the soil in Canada for a portion of a day in order to count as a day of physical presence. So if you are not physically present, that will not count for physical presence test in Canada. There are some very specific exemptions for government workers who have to be posted abroad, but you have to be working for the government of Canada, and it has to be a requirement of your job that you work overseas. So that's a whole other ball of wax, but generally physical presence requires your feet on Canadian soil.
All right. This one's from Santosh. He says, I am on an ICT. Should we still update this amount? So he's talking about the proof of funds change.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a good thing to point out too, Alicia, because we don't want to confuse people into thinking just because you are not required to establish it, that you don't need to update your profile.
Yeah, so, and I guess it depends what you mean by you're on an ICT. So I'm assuming you're on an intercompany transfer, you've got a work permit, you're working in Canada, and you have a profile under Express Entry. So if that's what's going on, then yes, you still need to update your amount if you want to be considered eligible for federal skilled worker. Sometimes if you're on an intercompany transfer and you are properly claiming arranged employment points, and be careful with who is listed as your employer of record on that intercompany transfer document. Take a look at the article and the explainer video I did about who can properly claim arranged employment. But in some circumstances, if you are already working for the Canadian employer and you can prove that, then you may not have to meet the settlement fund requirement, and you're only going to be qualifying for CEC. But if you don't yet have 1 year of high-skilled Canadian work within the last 3 years, you might not yet be eligible for CEC. So to be safe, make sure that you go in and you properly update your settlement figure amount, as long as you can properly prove you have over the minimum settlement funds for the number of people in your family.
All right, let's pull up our next comment. It's from David. It is so good to see you, my friend. He said, "Good morning, Mark and Alicia. David from Hill Spring here. Just can't get rid of the habit to watch your live streams. Greetings." So yes, David is a former client, and it's so great for you to connect in. Hope things are going well for you. I can see it's May. Your kids are just about finished school, so I'm excited to see what the future holds for you and your family, David. Thanks for connecting in. And of course, we've got Spider-Man, who's back in the house, back in Montreal. Good to have you connecting in. Okay, Saishan says, what about the OINP Human Capital Priority? Will they send invitations only to people who have these settlement funds, even if eligible for CEC? I think there's maybe some miscommunication here with Saishan, but do you understand what he's asking here, Alicia? I think you're maybe confusing. Ultimately, you have to be eligible in the pool for the Human Capital Priority stream. And if you're eligible in the pool via CEC, you don't need settlement funds for CEC. However, they're not going to determine or extend invitations to you on the basis of whether or not you have settlement funds, just purely settlement funds. It's based on whether or not you're in the pool and eligible through one of the federal skilled worker programs or the Canadian Experience Class Federal Skilled Trade.
Yeah, and I guess I'd add to that too, Mark, that it is a good point, though, that a lot of the provinces have some sort of settlement fund requirement that can be tied to the federal settlement fund requirement. So most provinces will say, we need you to be able to prove that if we nominate you, you can properly settle in our province. You've got enough money to support yourself to do that. And sometimes the provinces are a little bit more lenient. They say, if you have a job and you're working and you're earning over X amount of salary, then we're going to take that as your settlement funds, and you don't have to prove the federal settlement funds. But some of them say you might have some sort of settlement fund provincially tied to the federal settlement fund amount. So just make sure that if you are doing a PNP program, that you're looking at what the provincial settlement fund requirements are and you're meeting those. And if you don't meet those, then you may have to meet a federal settlement fund requirement just to prove that you can settle in that province.
All right, here's an interesting one. And this kind of harkens to the Manitoba issue that we were originally talking about, the announcement from the government of support. So Wilfred says, my application for the Manitoba, I think this is the MPM, has been in the pool for about 6 months now. We have all the calculations for invitations. The skull is about 700 plus. I think the score, maybe, I don't know. We have not still been called. So this is something I want to address, Alicia. In many provinces, there will be programs that allow you to submit an expression of interest or even apply to them. When you apply, processing times they vary. And largely they vary based on two things. One is the number of places that province has available to allocate to that particular application stream. And the other is the number of people that have actually been applying to that program. So if there is an astronomically high number of applicants, then you're going to be in a situation where the processing times climb astronomically. So if I jump back to Alberta, for instance, here, and we look at the number of allocations, this shows the allocations that were issued in 2023. And like I said, rural renewal stream, 875 total last year, for all of last year. And already this year, if we go down here by the rural renewal stream, let's see if I can find it here. There it is. So you can see how many do they have in the queue, or approximately 1,739 with 6 months processing times. And that's as of November 26, 2023. So ironically, Alicia, I was looking at they said, how many do you have in the queue? Well, this number here is actually considerably higher than what they had indicated in the conference last week. So there's no way that 1,739, when they only did 800 last year, are going to be processed in an expedited fashion. They have to drip them out and extend them out. And even though it says 6 months here, my understanding that it's probably closer to about 8 months for a nomination through the rural renewal stream. So if you go back to Manitoba here, part of the reason that they decided to issue these work permits through this program, this extension, this temporary measure for the 6,700 that are in the queue, is because work permits are going to expire, and they recognize that it could be up to even 2 years for these applications to be processed. So that's the world that we're dealing with there, Wilfred. So, and I'm assuming, I'm just going out on a limb and assuming that that's what you're referring to. Okay. All right, let's see what else we have here. Looks like we've got some other ones that slid in, but I don't know. Let's see here. Inderjeet says, my employer just signed and stamped the reference letter without writing his full name below his signature. Will it work? Once again, ring the triangle. We want it to be signed. I would encourage you to go back, Inderjeet, and get it signed by the employer. Full stop. Ask them to do that. Then you remove any concerns. And one thing I teach people all the time in my Express Entry Accelerator course, that's this one right here, is that your obligation is to give IRCC exactly what they want. If you do not give them exactly what they want, then you open up the possibility that an officer is going to say, not good enough. And they have way more people than they could ever possibly need in the queue to meet their annual levels plans. What that means for you is that ultimately, when immigration looks at your application and an officer is using their discretion, there's no skin off their back, you guys, for them to refuse an application if they feel there's something deficient. So is it possible for an application to be approved with just the employer just signed and stamped the reference letter without writing his full name, with just the signature and not the person's name? Maybe. I don't know what's on the stamp. Was the person's name on the stamp? I don't know. So there's just too many factors for us to say, Inderjeet, whether it's going to be an issue 100%. But when in doubt, fix it, is my advice. Alicia, do you have any other anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I mean, make sure that if you are departing, just like Mark said, from exactly what IRCC is saying in terms of what they want to see for those letters of reference, that there's a risk. And so try to meet those. And then Yeah, I did also want to answer a question mark that I saw popping up a couple times about
Mhm.
addresses in Express Entry profiles. And there's a few people who are asking about this because addresses in Express Entry profiles is going to be important. So there's Maria, and there's also Awesome Axel that is asking about lodging in a country and the UAE. Is that misrepresentation? And so IRCC a little while ago updated their express entry mandatory fields to now also have postal codes, right? And so this is something that can definitely catch people out. And it becomes really important when you are doing your profile, but also when you are going through your EAPR to make sure that you are very careful about what you are putting for your physical address when you're doing your uh, employment history, what you're doing for your physical address when you are doing your personal history, and what you're putting as your travel history. All those things play together to be able to come up as a complete picture for an officer when they're looking at your application. And so, if you have remote work, it is very important to specifically state that and add it to your client letter of explanation if that's what's happening, because immigration is also going to be tracking you for security and background clearance checks. And so if they can't properly do their homework to figure out where was this person physically living, that's going to affect their ability to check police certificates and do their background security clearances. So yes, all these things could potentially be a ground of misrepresentation if you're not doing it properly.
Great question. Okay, we'll finish off with Norton. This will be the last question today. I studied two certificate programs. Letter says I did 2 years full-time study, applied for postgrad from outside Canada, and got only 2 years instead of three. My three fellows got three. Can I get your services? Norton, absolutely. Just click on the link below, book a consult. We can take a look and see where the problem may lie. Immigration does make mistakes. And as immigration lawyers, that's our job, is to help you identify if the mistake was theirs or yours. If the mistake was theirs, then there are recourse. There's things that you can do. Sometimes clients omit things or forget to include something that resulted in the decision that IRCC made. Other times it was just wrong, and then we have to go and request reconsideration or challenge it. But generally speaking, if you've completed 2 years or more studies in Canada, and you can stack programs, you should generally be eligible for a 3-year postgrad work permit. But if your passport's expiring early or there's some other factor, sometimes that can play a role. So yes, if they didn't issue it for the full time, then there is mechanisms to assist in extending that. So just click on the link in our in the description below, slide over to our website, and it will take you right over here where you can book an immigration consultation with Alicia or myself or Igor. All right. I don't know if there's anything else, Alicia. I think we can probably wrap it up there. I think we've hit all the super chats, and yeah, I wish that we had time to answer everybody's question. We have a really good group of people that are tuning in right now. We'll see how the week goes. Maybe I'll surprise you guys with another live Q&A this week, depending on scheduling and everything. I want to also point out that Alicia and I are putting out a lot more really, really awesome content on our Canadian Immigration podcast as well. You will see those videos, the video version, appear in the YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed, do that. But if you're a commuter traveling long ways, then absolutely go to iTunes or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast, and subscribe to the Canadian Immigration podcast. Some of the more recent topics we've covered are startups and this whole changes with the self-employed program. This one, these major shifts, we invited Pantea Jafari to join us, who has managed this big managed litigation matter that she's going through for a number of Iranian self-employed candidates. And she feels that what she's doing has had an impact on this program. We've also, I did one just recently, what if I'm not invited in an express entry draw? So Alicia and I, we talked about all of those issues and some strategies to deal with what you guys are all facing right now. And then you also want to check out if you're a consultant or a lawyer or anyone who does a lot of recruiting from the Philippines, or you yourself are coming from the Philippines, or you're an employer recruiting. There's a lot of new updated changes with the temporary foreign worker exit visa requirements in the Philippines. So go check those out. Alicia and I just recorded just today. What was our topic for our podcast today that we recorded, Alicia?
It's all about PNPs and kind of this last hope of tenuous status and what's going to happen with PNPs. And on the note of PNPs, I just saw the note from Bettelham, and I just wanted to say congratulations. I am so excited that you got your e-coper, because this was a PNP situation, and it was a long haul. It was a complicated application. There were a lot of moving parts, and I am so glad and happy for you. So congratulations for
Oh,
that,
that is so
because that is
fantastic. Let's see if we can get this going here. Oh, there it is. And we've got some applause. So very, very cool. And we'll just pull up this other comment here. And she says, Alicia, I want to use this platform to express my deep gratitude for putting your knowledge, experience, and care into my application. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful working with you. Absolutely. And this is just, yeah, this is what we love, right, Alicia? We absolutely love individuals who jump on, take the time to give us a little shout out. And it really means a lot. So obviously, how much are we getting paid to do this, Alicia? Every week for at least an hour? A whopping,
we're doing
but we're
this for free,
paid,
guys. We're doing this for
we're
free.
paid. We are paid, aren't we, Alicia? We're paid in gratitude and just feeling like we're doing something positive and giving back. So, okay. Look at this. Seriously, Anne, I said that we were done. So seriously, okay. I'll do one last one. Don't anyone else who does a super chat, I'm not answering it today. So here we go. All right, let's see. Well, I don't even know what your question is, Anne. You've got please answer my question. Okay, I am searching, Anne, for your question, and I do not see it in I don't see it anywhere here. So maybe you see it somewhere, Alicia. Oh, here we go. Here we go. I think we've got it. So let's see. And we may not be able to answer it. Maybe that's why I skipped it. So is it possible that the non-express entry PNP PR application that I have filed in now be compared to the express entry profile I created in the past? Oh, now I see, which shows ineligible as soon as it was launched. So, and then the question is, does it affect, or is it possible that the currently filed non-express entry PNP PR application be compared to past EE profile created, which shows ineligible since the start? Okay. So what, so I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Alicia.
Yeah,
Our
I mean,
final
my
wrap
thoughts
up.
on this are that IRCC and the provinces share information. And so if there is any doubt or any concern with a prior application that you filed that was found to be ineligible, don't hide it. Just talk about it. Just say, hey, I did this express entry or non-express entry application and it was found to be ineligible. Here's the profile number. Here's the reason it was ineligible, and I'm not hiding it. This is what happened, and you can't be accused of misrepresentation if you just tell the truth.
Absolutely. Amen. Amen. All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back at it for sure next Wednesday. This, maybe it's today. Today is Wednesday. I'm going to do a masterclass tonight, I think. I'll have to see if Igor posted it. But for the masterclass, anyone who subscribes to the masterclass can join me even this evening. And remember, as always, our videos and our lives are sponsored by the Express Entry Accelerator. If you have not gone and checked it out, please do it. It is something that I absolutely love and enjoy, those masterclasses. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys all